Hi, are you struggling with the math for the general election of 2022? Do you sometimes want to know what the numbers are saying? Well, you're in the right place because today on Twizy we will be looking at why the numbers seem to be saying it's Ruto for 2022. For those of you who haven't been here before, Twizy is a TV station that focuses on bringing you analysis on a wide range of current affairs with specific impact on Kenya and Africa. We'd like you to comment on our output below and to consider subscribing so that we can continue creating the content for your enjoyment. And now, let's get on to today's subject, which is why the numbers seem to show 2022 is Ruto's to lose. Let's start by looking at what the Constitution 2010 says about who wins presidential elections in Kenya. Now, there are two important numbers in the Constitution about the winner of the presidential elections, and the first of these is the presidential election winner must win at least 50% of the votes cast nationally. In other words, they must win more than 50% of the votes that are cast for the president in the election. The second number that is relevant to our discussion today is the presidential winner must win at least 25% of the votes cast in at least 50% of the counties of the republic. That means they must win at least 25%, a quarter of the votes cast in at least 24 or more of the Republic's 47 counties. Right. Before we look at the numbers from the Constitution and how they shape up on the ground, I want to make an assertion here about the challenges who the Deputy President faces in both his home counties of the Rift Valley and in what used to be called Central Province and now is more colloquially known as the Mountain. The Deputy President appears to have no credible opposition for the leadership and for the presidency of this country coming out of the Mountain. And that's for one very good reason. The Mountain is an area, an environment of assorted ethnicities related by blood and by tradition to the Kikuyus. Now, the last two presidents of this republic have both been Kikuyu, and therefore it seems very difficult that anyone could justify that somebody could stand for election from the mountain region as a Kikuyu or as an ethnicity that is related in some way to the Kikuyus and credibly say that they would win. It doesn't make sense. Now, in the Rift Valley, the Deputy President appears to have locked the loyalty of a lot of the population, not all, but a lot of the population, with his only likely challenger being Gideon Moi, who represents or is the flag bearer for the KANU party. Now, the public, the voting public, appear to have given Moi a bit of a wide berth for one good reason. He is the son of the ex-dictator of this country, Moi, who ruled from 1978 through to the multi-party elections of 2012. It is for this reason that I believe that in the Mountain and in the Rift Valley, the Deputy President has no credible opposition for the position of President of the country of Kenya. Taken together, there are some 19 counties in the old Rift and Central provinces of Kenya, what one might call the Deputy President's backyard. In addition to those 19 counties, there are another 3 in what used to be the old Eastern Province that are very closely allied to the Mountain and have strong links to the Kikuyu in the Central region, making a grand total of about 22 counties in what is easily referred to as the deputy president's backyard. These are counties that would provide the backbone of the 24 counties that we've already talked about when discussing the electoral requirements for winning the presidency as set out in the Constitution. Now, in those 22 counties, we have approximately 17 million people living in those counties. If we assume that out of those 17 million, approximately 40% are voters, that gives us a voting population of about 7 million people. Of that population, if we assume that the deputy president will win something in the order of about 80% of the votes, being his backyard, that gives him about 5.6 million votes in the rift and central areas of this country, even before we talk about his ability to win votes in any other part of the country during the election. That is 5.6 million votes where the current president, Uhuru, won 2 elections with slightly over 8 million votes on both occasions in 2013 and 2017. Can you see why the numbers are beginning to stack up very heavily in favor of the deputy president? So we've now looked at the constitutional requirements for the winner of a presidential election in Kenya. We understand that in his backyard of the old Central and Rift Valley provinces, the DP appears to have no credible opposition. And given the numbers of potential voters in those 2 old provinces, we can see that he has a clear advantage in terms of achieving the numbers that the Constitution requires for a winner of the presidential election. But there is one more item that I think we should discuss in order to show conclusively that the deputy president is way ahead in terms of the numbers when it comes to the elections of 2022. That item is simple. There are too many cooks in the deputy president's opposition kitchen. What that means is there are many people who believe that they can be president of this country, but none of them has the advantages that we've demonstrated for the deputy president in terms of his backyard, in other words, having no credible opposition, and none of them can muster the number of voters and votes in their limited backyards that would allow them to compete in terms of what the Constitution requires in order for a president to win. And so there you have it. Those are the reasons why the deputy president appears to be ahead of the pack in terms of his ability to win the 2022 presidential election. I really hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, please subscribe below. Thank you very much, and watch again. Do you ever worry about the number of court decisions that the Kenyan government refuses to obey? Do you ever ask yourself about the relationship between the judiciary and the Kenyan government? Well, in today's segment of Twisi TV, we will be looking at the rule of law in the jungle. Hey, if you're new to this channel at Twisi TV, we are all about analyzing Kenyan current affairs. If you like the content that we produce, we'd appreciate you subscribing below and giving us your comments about the content. That will help us to continue creating content that you will enjoy. And now, today's topic, which is the rule of law in a jungle. Let's start by refreshing your memories about some of the recent court cases where the Kenyan government has refused to obey court decisions. The first and probably most prominent one in the recent past has been the case of Miguna, the lawyer who was deported to Canada, where he has dual citizenship, after the illegal swearing in of Raila Odinga on January the 30th of 2018. The courts ordered the Kenyan government to return his Kenyan passport to him so that he could come back into the country, and thus far they have failed to do so. A second notable one is where the ex-commander of the Kenyan Air Force, a certain Peter Kariuki, was awarded in excess of 71 million shillings, having had his involvement in the coup attempt of 1982 quashed by the courts. The Kenyan government has to date refused to pay that amount of money and restore his rank, his honor, and his decorations, in complete disregard of the judicial decision that was taken against them. In 2010, Jeremiah Barasa, an NYS official, had an industrial accident while at work. The government was ordered to pay him an amount of about 3.6 million, which again to date they have refused to pay out. The man continues to suffer without having his judicial decision actioned by the government. And even the judiciary fails to observe its own orders. The Kiambu magistrate, Brian Kaemba, was reinstated into position by the courts, and the CJ at that time, CJ Maraga, refused to put him back into position, necessitating Kaemba to go back to the courts and obtain a contempt of court order against the judiciary itself. This is the kind of rule of law in the jungle that we're talking about, where judicial decisions are taken by the courts and then promptly disobeyed by all involved, the judiciary themselves included. There is really only one law in the jungle that works, and that is might is right. In the Kenyan context, the Kenyan government and the judiciary, for that matter, are behaving like players in the jungle. It cannot be that where there is conflict between citizens and the government, between agencies of the government themselves, that they pick and choose what they want to obey and discard the rest. The law is not an a la carte menu of items that you want to follow and others which you choose to disregard because they don't suit you at that particular moment in time. That is the jungle. And it seems that this is where the Kenyan government has brought us to. Its constant and repeated failure to follow judicial decisions means it is acting like it is in the jungle. What incentive is there for us, the citizens, to obey the law when they themselves, who create it, fail to do so? There is none. This is a problem. It is a problem that governments in Kenya, since independence, have tended to perpetrate. We cannot have a situation where the legislators are the very same people who are refusing to obey the laws that they put together for the governance of this country. A country that has no law and order has nothing. That is because without law and order, nothing else can function. This is why it is so important, so critical, that the Kenyan government learns to understand that following the law allows this country to move forward and ahead. It is important for the Kenyan government to follow the law that it itself has established as a means of further developing this country. Down the route where a government fails to obey its own laws lies trouble. Therein is the path towards dictatorship and tyranny. It cannot be a good place for a country to go if you want to remain in the commonwealth of civilized nations. Civilized countries, their governments and their citizens, and all the institutions in that country obey the law. If you don't like the law, then you have recourse to changing it through the legislature, or alternatively, by making appeals in the courts themselves. But you cannot just choose to ignore the law as it applies to you when there is conflict because you do not like it. That is the rule of law in a jungle.